Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
And this time we're taking a look at cybersecurity, a topic that never gets old, never stands still, and let's be real, can be a little overwhelming to keep up with.
It can be a lot, yeah.
Luckily, we have a fantastic tool to help us navigate this complex world, tsecurity.de. It's basically like a live, constantly updating news feed that pulls from almost 700 different sources on all things cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's an incredible resource, especially given how quickly things change in this field.
I know, right? Like just in the past week, tsecurity.dv has logged over 13,000 new entries.
13,000.
Yeah, that's just wild. So today we're using tsecurity.de not just to understand the latest happenings, but to figure out what you, the listener, needs to know to stay safe and ahead of the curve.
Cut through the noise and pull out those actionable insights.
Love it. Now, one of the cool things I like about this portal is the frequently searched section. It's kind of like a window into the minds of everyone else who's also trying to keep up with cybersecurity.
It is.
Some of the top searches recently have been firewall configuration, security awareness, password security, and two-factor authentication.
Interesting.
What do you make of those?
Well, I think what's interesting is they reveal a combination of basic and more advanced concerns. People are clearly looking for guidance on some of the fundamental security practices.
Yeah.
Which tells us there's still a real need for clear, actionable advice.
For sure. So as we kind of dive into specific news and vulnerabilities, I think we should keep these frequently searched terms in mind.
Right.
Like, how can this deep dive help give you, the listener, the tools and knowledge you need to address these very concerns?
Absolutely.
Now, even a quick glance at tsecurity.de shows a lot of chatter about e-commerce and DDoS attacks.
Yeah, no surprise there, especially with the holidays coming up.
Yeah. I think it's worth pausing here just to break down what a DDoS attack is and why it should matter to you, even if you don't run an e-commerce site.
Right. So in the simplest terms, a DDoS attack is like a digital mob storming a store. They flood a website or online service with so much traffic that it crashes, preventing legitimate users from getting in. Kind of like cutting the phone lines to a business, except, on a much larger scale.
Yeah. And these attacks are becoming more and more common, right? Like tsecurity.de even mentions one that recently targeted the Russian Foreign Ministry.
During a major summit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What's concerning is that these attacks are relatively easy to launch.
Yeah, they are.
And they can be used for anything from petty pranks to serious disruption.
Yeah, to businesses, governments, even critical services.
So what can the average person actually do to protect themselves from these attacks?
Yeah.
Not like we can, build stronger websites ourselves.
Right. You can't directly prevent a DDoS attack, but you can mitigate the impact. I mean, start by understanding that any online service you rely on, your banking, your email, shopping, social media, all of that could be targeted.
Okay, so the first step is awareness. But then what? Do we just have to cross our fingers and hope for the best?
Well, not quite. The good news is that many service providers are investing heavily in DDoS protection. They're building more resilient systems and using sophisticated techniques to filter out that bad traffic.
So it's partly about choosing services that, actually prioritize security.
Absolutely. Look for providers that explicitly mention DDoS protection in their security policies, things like that.
Okay.
And consider using a VPN, a virtual private network.
A VPN.
Especially when you're on public Wi-Fi. A VPN encrypts your internet traffic, and that makes it harder for attackers to target you directly.
Oh, that's a good tip. VPNs are often talked about for privacy, but it sounds like they play a role in this too.
Absolutely.
So even if a service I use is hit with a DDoS attack, the impact on me might be, minimal?
Yeah,
But
probably. It might just be a temporary outage or some slow loading times.
okay, so that's not so bad.
Yeah, it's frustrating, sure, but usually not a catastrophic event.
Okay, good. So it's about understanding the risk, choosing secure services, and having a little patience if something does happen.
Right. Now, shifting gears a bit, we're also seeing a lot of activity on tsecurity.de related to a specific type of malware called a Trojaner, specifically one called Cybersecurity.
A Trojaner. That sounds a little ominous.
It does, yeah.
So unlike a DDoS attack, which is more about brute force, what is this?
Yeah, a Trojaner is more like a stealthy intruder. It disguises itself as something harmless, like a helpful program or file. But once it's inside your system, it can do a lot of damage.
Yikes. So what makes this Cybersecurity Trojaner stand out?
Well, two things are particularly concerning. First, it appears to be spreading through emails written in German, which suggests a very targeted attack.
Okay.
And second, it's specifically aimed at businesses in the cybersecurity sector.
Well, wait. So cybersecurity companies are being targeted by malware? Isn't that a little ironic?
It might seem that way, but it actually makes sense. Think about it.
Okay.
Cybersecurity companies are valuable targets because they possess the knowledge and tools that could be used to launch even more sophisticated attacks.
Oh, I see.
So it's a reminder that no one is immune to this stuff, even the experts.
Right. Okay. So what can businesses, especially those in cybersecurity, do to protect themselves from something like this? I mean, I'm guessing strong passwords are just the tip of the iceberg.
You're right. Passwords are important, but they're not enough on their own. For starters, robust email security is crucial.
Okay.
Spam filters that detect and block those malicious emails. And most importantly, employee training to help them spot those phishing attempts.
Yeah, the human element again. Even with the best tech, it comes down to someone clicking the wrong thing.
Exactly. Which is why we keep coming back to that security awareness search. It's not just about tools and software. It's about creating a culture of vigilance.
Totally. So as we move on to explore some of these specific vulnerabilities listed on tsecurity.de, let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the technical details.
No, it's not.
It's about figuring out what you can actually do to stay safe.
Exactly. So you mentioned vulnerabilities, and looking at tsecurity.de.
Oh, there's so many.
I know, right?
It's kind of scary how many there are. Like, I get that software and hardware are complex, but it just seems like there's a new vulnerability popping up every minute.
It does feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But instead of getting lost in the weeds with individual cases, let's focus on the bigger picture. What are some common categories of vulnerabilities that you, the listener, need to be aware of?
Right, because most of us aren't going to memorize a bunch of CVE numbers.
Exactly. So let's talk about things you can control.
Okay.
One of the most common vulnerabilities, weak passwords.
Oh, yeah.
It's shocking how many people still use easily guessable passwords. Or even worse, the same password for multiple accounts.
Oh, I am guilty of that. Or at least I was. I finally started using a password manager, and that's been a lifesaver.
Password managers are great. They generate those strong, unique passwords for each of your accounts and store them securely so you don't have to remember them all. Simple step, huge difference.
What else should we be thinking about?
Another big one is outdated software. Think about it, your operating system, your web browser, your apps. They all release updates regularly, and those updates include security patches for newly discovered vulnerabilities.
So it's not just about getting the latest features, it's about actually installing the updates.
Right. It's like leaving your front door unlocked because you're too lazy to turn the key. Those updates might seem like a hassle, but they're crucial.
Okay. Strong passwords, updated software.
Yeah.
Got it. What else?
Well, this might seem obvious, but be careful about what you click on and what you download, especially links and attachments from senders you don't recognize.
Right. If something seems too good to be true or even just a little off, better safe than sorry.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure about a link or attachment, don't be afraid to reach out to the sender directly just to verify, hey, is this legit? A quick phone call or a text could save you so much trouble.
It's all about being proactive and developing good digital habits.
Absolutely. And, that leads us to another important point. Cybersecurity is not just about protecting your devices. It's also about protecting your data.
Right. We share so much information online, our personal details, financial info, photos, conversations. It's kind of scary to think about how vulnerable all that is.
It is. And that's why it's essential to be mindful of what you share online and who you're sharing it with.
Yeah.
Think about the privacy settings on your social media accounts. Be cautious about using public Wi-Fi for sensitive transactions, and consider using encryption tools to protect your data.
Encryption. Now, there's a term we haven't really touched on yet. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. Encryption is basically like scrambling your data.
Okay.
So that only someone with the right key can read it. Like putting your information in a locked box that only authorized people have access to.
So even if someone intercepts my data, they can't actually read it without that key.
Exactly. And there are tons of different encryption tools available these days. From built-in features on your devices to dedicated apps and services. Using encryption just adds that extra layer of security, makes it that much harder for attackers to get your sensitive info.
That's awesome. So it's like a digital safety net for my data.
Exactly. And it's not just for tech-savvy folks either. Many apps and services offer encryption options that are super easy to use, easy to understand.
Perfect. Okay. So strong passwords, Updated software, being careful what we click on, being mindful of what we share online, and using encryption. Sounds like a lot.
It can feel like a lot, I know. But you don't have to do everything at once. Just start with the basics and gradually build from there.
Okay,
It's progress, not perfection.
I like that. And as you're implementing these security practices, you kind of start to develop that cybersecurity mindset.
You do. You become more aware of the risks, more cautious in your digital interactions, and more confident in your ability to protect yourself and your data.
I like the sound of that. A cybersecurity mindset, it's like a superpower for the digital age.
Huh. I like that analogy. Speaking of superpowers, let's talk a bit about artificial intelligence, or AI. This is another area generating a lot of buzz on tsecurity.dd.
Yeah, I've been seeing headlines about AI being used for everything these days, from writing code to creating art, even composing music.
It is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It's rapidly evolving and being applied to all sorts of fields. And with that comes new opportunities, but also new risks.
Okay, so how does AI fit into the cybersecurity landscape?
Well, on the one hand, AI can be a powerful tool for defense.
Okay.
It can help analyze massive amounts of data to identify threats, detect anomalies, automate security tasks.
So it's like having an army of digital security guards working 24/7.
Yeah, in a way. But on the other hand, AI can also be used by attackers
Oh, no.
to create more sophisticated and evasive threats.
Oh, so it's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. For example, AI can be used to create more convincing phishing emails,
Oh, wow.
generate fake social media profiles, or even develop malware that can adapt and evolve to bypass traditional security measures.
That's a little unsettling.
It is.
Like an arms race between the good guys and the bad guys, but with AI as the weapon.
It's a good analogy. And as AI continues to advance, this arms race is only going to intensify.
So what can we do to prepare for this AI-powered future of cybersecurity?
Well, I think the first thing is to stay informed about the latest developments in AI
Okay.
and its implications for security.
Right.
tsecurity.de is a great resource for that.
Right. They have a whole category dedicated to AI and security.
Exactly. And just like with other aspects of cybersecurity, awareness is key. The more you understand about AI and its potential, both the risks and the benefits, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this landscape.
Okay.
It's about staying curious, keeping up with the trends, being adaptable as these technologies emerge.
Right. And remember, AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. The key is making sure it's developed and used responsibly, with a focus on ethics and security.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, the frequently searched terms on tsecurity.de.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but it seems like there's one key term we haven't addressed yet: two-factor authentication.
Yes, two-factor authentication, or 2FA. It's a simple but incredibly effective security measure that everyone should be using.
I've heard of it. Can you give us a quick rundown of what it is and why it's so important?
Sure. Two-factor authentication adds an extra layer of security to your online accounts by requiring you to provide two forms of identification before you can log in.
Okay, so it's not just about my password anymore.
Exactly. The first factor is usually something you know, like your password, but the second factor is something you have, like your smartphone or a security key.
So even if someone steals my password, they can't get into my account without that second factor. Exactly. It's like having two locks on your door. Makes it that much harder to break in.
That makes sense. And 2FA is becoming more and more common, right?
Yeah, it is.
A lot of websites and apps now offer it as an option.
They do, and I highly recommend enabling it wherever possible. One of the most effective steps you can take to protect those online accounts.
It's a small change that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Speaking of small changes that make a big difference, let's touch on something else that popped up in that frequently searched section: firewall configuration.
Oh yeah, firewalls. Those are those things that block bad stuff from getting into our computers, right?
That's the basic idea. A firewall acts as a barrier between your computer or network and the outside world. It filters incoming and outgoing traffic and blocks anything that looks suspicious.
So like a digital bouncer keeping the riffraff out.
Exactly. And just like a good bouncer, a well-configured firewall can be incredibly effective at preventing unwanted intrusions.
But how do you actually configure a firewall? It sounds kind of technical.
It can be, but the good news is most operating systems come with built-in firewalls that are relatively easy to manage.
Oh, good. So we don't need to install separate software or anything.
Right, and there are tons of resources online that can guide you through those basic steps of configuring your firewall. Or you can consult with a tech-savvy friend or family member if you need a little help.
So it's about taking ownership of our security and not being afraid to ask for help.
Exactly. And remember, even if you're not a tech expert, you can still take steps to improve your cybersecurity. It's about understanding the risks, implementing those basic security practices, and staying informed.
As we've been talking about all this cybersecurity stuff, I keep thinking about how much of it really boils down to human behavior.
It's true, yeah. Technology is a huge part of it, but in the end, it's often our own actions that make us vulnerable.
Exactly, like clicking on that phishing email that just looks a little too good to be true.
Exactly, or using that same weak password for all your accounts. Hackers are experts at exploiting human psychology. They prey on our curiosity, our trust, our desire for convenience.
Yeah, it's almost like they're playing a game and we don't even realize we're participating.
That's a great way to put it, and the stakes are high.
They are.
One careless click, one forgotten password, and it can have some pretty serious consequences.
So what can we do to kind of level the playing field? How can we become more aware of these psychological traps and avoid falling victim?
Well, awareness is the first step. Just understanding that these tactics exist and that anyone can be targeted is crucial.
Right, it's like knowing the rules of the game before you start playing.
Exactly. And once you're aware of the risks, you can start to develop that healthy skepticism.
Okay.
Question everything. Don't click on links. Don't open attachments from senders you don't recognize. Verify requests for sensitive information. And if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Right, it's all about being cautious and thinking critically before you act.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting your family, your friends, your colleagues.
Right.
Share what you learn. Spread awareness. We're all in this together.
That's such an important point. Cybersecurity is not just an individual responsibility. It's a collective effort.
Exactly. The more we work together, the more we educate ourselves and each other, the stronger our defenses will be.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm definitely going to be putting some of these tips into practice right away.
Me too. It's been great exploring this topic with you. And to all of our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep learning and keep exploring.
Yes.
This world of cybersecurity is constantly evolving, but with the right knowledge and that right mindset, you can stay ahead of the curve and keep yourself and your data safe.
And remember, if you're looking for a great resource to stay up to date on all the latest cybersecurity news, threats, and best practices, be sure to check out tiasecurity.de.
It's an invaluable tool for anyone and everyone who wants to navigate the digital world safely and confidently.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics. We'll be back soon with another episode exploring a whole new world of knowledge. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep on learning.